After my husband died, his own mother looked me in the eye and took everything, the house, the firm, everything except my daughter. My lawyer begged me to fight, but I shocked everyone and let it all go without a word. They thought I had lost my mind, but I was playing a game no one else could see. At the final hearing, I signed the papers with a calm smile while she celebrated her victory. But in that exact moment, her lawyer's face suddenly drained of color, because something had just gone terribly wrong. The day my husband died, the water in the bathtub was still warm. I was scrubbing soap from beneath my fingernails, my sleeves rolled high, when the phone call shattered the quiet safety of our home in Kivington. In a single heartbeat, I went from being a 31-year-old mother giving her daughter a bath to a widow racing toward an office building with damp arms and a hollow chest. By the time I reached the parking lot on Madison Avenue, the paramedics had already stopped trying, and the man I had loved since I was 22 was gone, his hands still resting near his coffee mug on the desk he had built from nothing. They say grief makes you strong, but they are wrong. Grief makes you slow. It turns your reflexes to lead, leaving you standing still while the world continues to throw punches you would normally see coming from miles away. That is the only reason I let Carla into my kitchen 11 days after the funeral. She didn't come to offer condolences or to hold her granddaughter, Tessa. She came wearing a gray blazer, dressed for a board meeting, followed by her younger son Spencer, who was carrying a yellow tape measure. While I stood there holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes prior, Carla informed me that she was reclaiming her investment. To her, Joel's life and his law firm were just assets on a ledger, and she was here to collect the interest. Carla Fredel was never a helpless woman. She had built a small empire of 4 dry cleaning stores across northern Kentucky after her divorce, and she viewed the world through the lens of simple retail math. In her mind, Joel's law firm, Fredel and Associates, was just another shop. Instead of pressing shirts, he pressed lawsuits instead of quarters in a machine. He had $600,000 a year rolling through the books. She had loaned him $185,000 to start that firm 6 years ago, and she had spent every day since making sure I knew that she, not I, was the true foundation of his success. She once introduced me to her friends as Joel's first wife while we were still very much married and standing right next to her. Now, with Joel in the ground, she was ready to excise me from the balance sheet entirely. As she spoke, Spencer wandered through my house, the metallic snap and click of his tape measure echoing from the guest bedroom. It was a surreal, insulting display. Spencer was 29, had never held a job for more than 5 months, and lived in Carla's guest house in Burlington, where his primary contribution to society was ordering electronics with his mother's credit card. Hearing him measure my closets while his mother demanded the deed to my house should have made me scream, but I was paralyzed by the weight of the last 2 weeks. Carla laid out her demands with the clinical coldness of a debt collector. She wanted the firm, she wanted the house, and she wanted the bank accounts. The only thing she didn't want was Tessa. She declined the child as if she were waving away a side dish at a restaurant. The legal hammer dropped 48 hours later. A certified letter arrived from Axel Mendler, a high-priced attorney Carla had hired to file a formal contest of Joel's will and a creditor's claim against the estate for her initial loan. She was spending $350 an hour to sue her daughter-in-law before the funeral flowers had even begun to wilt. While I was struggling to explain to a 4-year-old why her father wasn't coming home, Carla was already walking into Joel's office on Scott Boulevard like she owned the floorboards. She introduced herself to the staff as the new oversight of operations, demanding revenue reports and asserting her dominance over a business she had no legal right to touch. The firm's bookkeeper, Gail Horvath, had been with Joel for 6 years. When Carla demanded the numbers, Gail gave her exactly what she asked for, the top-line revenue. Carla saw the figure of $620,000 in annual billings, nodded with the smug satisfaction of a woman who had just confirmed she was a millionaire, and walked out. She never asked for the expense reports. She never looked at the debts. She saw the gold in the pan, but never checked the weight of the lead sinking the boat. Carla's arrogance was her own undoing, though I didn't realize it yet. She began calling Joel's clients, introducing herself as the transition manager despite having no law license and no understanding of the cases. Terrified by a phone call from their dead lawyer's mother, the clients began fleeing to other firms in droves. She was burning down the house while arguing with the insurance company about the value of the drapes. It culminated when Spencer showed up at my front door with a PlayStation, 2 duffel bags, and a bag of barbecue chips, announcing that he was moving in because his mother said the house was basically theirs. I had to call the Covington police to have him escorted off the property. That night, Carla screamed at me over the phone, her voice reaching a pitch somewhere between a smoke alarm and an opera singer, calling me heartless for throwing his brother onto the street. My support system was pleading with me to fight. My mother drove up from Lexington, and my best friend Shannon called every night, urging me to hire a shark. So, I found Lyra Schmidt. Lyra was a German-American attorney in her mid-50s with silver-streaked hair and a calm, precise energy that felt like a life raft in a storm. After reviewing Carla's filings, Lyra told me we could win. There was no partnership agreement, and the will was solid. We could fight, and Carla would go home with nothing but a lesson in contract law. But that night, I went to Joel's dark office. I sat in his chair, surrounded by the smell of his sandalwood aftershave and old coffee. In the bottom drawer, behind a stack of case folders, I found a sealed manila envelope with my name on it, written in his precise handwriting with a small heart drawn next to it. Inside was a letter that changed everything. Joel had known he was dying. 8 months prior, he had been diagnosed with a progressive heart condition that he kept secret from everyone, including his mother and brother. He spent those 8 months quietly, methodically rearranging the pieces of our lives. The envelope contained 3 things: a heartbreaking letter to me, beneficiary confirmations for his life insurance and retirement accounts, totaling over $1 million, which would pay directly to me outside of probate, and a terrifyingly detailed summary of the firm's actual financial health. The firm wasn't a gold mine, it was a sinking ship. Joel had listed every debt: a $180,000 malpractice settlement, unpaid payroll taxes that the IRS would eventually come for, and an office lease worth nearly $150,000. The house, which Carla coveted so much, was leveraged to the hilt with a home equity line of credit he'd used to keep the firm afloat. If Carla won the estate, she wasn't winning a fortune, she was inheriting a mountain of debt and personal liability. The next morning, I called Lyra. My voice was different, steady and clear for the first time since the tragedy. I told her I didn't want to fight anymore. I told her I wanted to give Carla everything she was asking for. Every account, the house, the firm, all of it. In exchange, I wanted only one thing: sole custody of Tessa with no visitation for Carla. When I sat in Lyra's office and showed her the math, how I walked away with over $1 million in clean, tax-free cash, while Carla would inherit over $500,000 in debt, the veteran attorney leaned back and laughed until her eyes watered. She immediately drafted a settlement offer that looked like a total surrender. Miriam Fredel would relinquish everything. Carla's attorney, Axel Mendler, was suspicious. He asked for 2 weeks to perform a forensic audit of the books. He knew a trap when he saw one. But Carla, fueled by greed and the sight of those $600,000 revenue reports, refused to wait. She wanted her empire now. Carla Fredel had spent 7 years watching me with a mixture of pity and disdain, convinced I was a woman of glass who would shatter under the slightest pressure. She saw a quiet, polite daughter-in-law who never pushed back at holiday dinners, even when Carla introduced me as Joel's first wife or made pointed remarks about my lack of ambition. To her, my sudden offer of total surrender wasn't a red flag, it was a white flag. In the predator-prey logic that governed her world, I was simply folding because I didn't have the stomach for a fight. If you're holding a winning hand and your opponent tries to walk away from the table, You don't ask them to stay and double-check the cards, you take the pot. I've seen the revenue, Carla told her attorney, Axel Mendler, with the kind of ironclad certainty that precludes wisdom. $620,000 a year. My son built that with my money, and I want it. Get me those papers before she changes her mind. Axel Mendler was a professional, and he knew a lopsided deal when he saw one. He pushed back with the practiced caution of a man who had seen greed-blind clients before. He drafted a formal advisory letter, 2 pages of dense, single-spaced warnings, stating clearly that due diligence on the firm's financial position was incomplete. He recommended, in no uncertain terms, that Carla wait for a full forensic audit before accepting the transfer of both assets and liabilities. It was a beautiful piece of self-protection on his part. Carla read it, scoffed, and signed the waiver at the bottom, legally acknowledging that she was proceeding against her counsel's advice. She told him to schedule the signing immediately. Before the final meeting, Axel reached out to my lawyer, Lyra, with one final, standard question. He asked if there were any non-estate assets they should be aware of, specifically life insurance or retirement accounts with named beneficiaries. Lyra's response was a masterpiece of legal precision. She stated that non-estate assets were outside the scope of the estate settlement and that her client was under no legal obligation to disclose them. Carla heard this and dismissed it. In her mind, Joel was a healthy 36-year-old man. Young men didn't think about death, and they certainly didn't waste money on life insurance. She had no idea that a bank had forced his hand 6 years ago, or that Joel was the kind of man who kept his promises to a premium notice even when the rest of his world was fraying at the edges. While Carla was busy ignoring her own lawyer, I was quietly constructing a fortress. The insurance company processed my claim in less than 3 weeks. $875,000 landed in a new personal checking account I had opened at a credit union in Florence, Kentucky, a bank with no ties to Joel, the firm, or the estate. I initiated the rollovers for the retirement accounts next, moving over $200,000 into my name alone. I began moving our lives out of the house in Covington, one cardboard box at a time. I started with Tessa's clothes and toys, then my books and the family photo albums. I found a clean, safe 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes south in a good school district. When the landlord asked for the first and last month's rent, I wrote a check for $1,800 and didn't even blink. Meanwhile, Spencer was playing at being a high-powered executive. Carla had installed him at the firm to manage operations, which mostly involved him spinning in Joel's leather chair and struggling to navigate the multi-line phone system. On his 3rd day, Carla took him to the bank to be added as a co-signer on the firm's operating account so he could handle the daily expenses. Spencer, who never read anything that didn't have a digital screen or a controller attached, signed every document the bank put in front of him. He had no idea that by putting his name on those papers, he was making himself personally and jointly liable for every obligation tied to that account. He was smiling while he tied a financial noose around his own neck. My mother came up from Lexington one last time before the signing. We sat at my new IKEA kitchen table, a small piece of furniture I had assembled myself, an act that felt like a more significant victory than my entire marriage. She looked at me with deep concern, asking if I was having a breakdown for giving up Joel's house and his life's work. I wanted to open my laptop right there, show her the bank balance, and watch the color drain from her face, but I couldn't risk it. The Kentucky mother-to-mother telephone chain is faster than fiber-optic internet. If a single word leaked, the trap would snap shut on air. I just told her to trust me. She didn't, but she hugged me anyway. The signing was set for a Tuesday in late June. The night before, I felt a strange, cool calm. I laid out Tessa's outfit for daycare and packed my bag with my new apartment lease and a folder showing over $1 million in liquid, untouchable assets. I fell asleep in 5 minutes, the first real rest I'd had since the night Joel's heart stopped. We met at Axel Mendler's office on Pike Street. The conference room was drab, smelling of industrial carpet and the burnt, theoretical coffee from the machine in the corner. Lyra and I arrived early, taking our seats on the left. At 9:20, the opposition arrived. Carla looked like she was walking the red carpet, draped in a silk blouse and gold earrings, her makeup flawless. Spencer followed in a new navy blazer, unaware that the price tag was still tucked inside his collar, flapping against his neck like a tiny white flag of surrender. I didn't tell him. The documents were laid out. I, Miriam Fredel, officially transferred all claims to the estate, the firm, the house, the accounts, to Carla Fredel, who accepted them along with all associated liabilities. In exchange, I received full sole custody of my daughter, with no visitation rights for her grandmother or uncle. Lyra made a brief, quiet statement for the record, confirming that I was signing voluntarily and that Carla had reviewed the liabilities. Axel gave a curt nod. Carla didn't even look at me. She was already reaching for her pen, her eyes fixed on the empire she thought she was inheriting. I signed. She signed. Spencer sat there grinning like he'd just been named King of Covington. The entire process took 8 minutes. As I stood to leave, Carla couldn't resist one last jab. She looked across the table and told me she hoped I'd finally learned to stand on my own 2 feet without a Fredel to lean on. I didn't respond. I just picked up my bag and walked out into the humid June air. That afternoon, I picked up Tessa and took her to our new home. I made her dinosaur-shaped macaroni and cheese, and we watched cartoons until she fell asleep on the couch with cheese on her chin. After I carried her to bed, I sat on the floor of my new kitchen, leaned my back against the cabinet, and just breathed. It was the most peaceful night of my life. The peace lasted exactly 3 weeks. That was how long it took for the reality of Fredel and Associates to come knocking on Carla's door. On a Tuesday morning in July, Carla walked into the office on Scott Boulevard, ready to be the queen of the legal world, only to find the walls closing in. Carla Fredel finally had her empire, but in a town like Covington, the walls have ears and the pavement has a memory. I wasn't there to witness her coronation, but I didn't need to be. Between the office gossip that reached Gail and the frantic, screeching phone calls Carla eventually lobbed my way, the picture became crystal clear. On day 1, she sat at Joel's mahogany desk and opened the mail she had spent weeks walking past. The third envelope was a notice from the IRS, $47,000 in unpaid payroll taxes, with penalties compounding like a fever. By day 3, the phone rang. It was a firm in Cincinnati representing a malpractice plaintiff. Joel had already agreed to a $180,000 settlement before his heart gave out the payment was now overdue. The attorney on the other end was polite, firm, and entirely unmoved by Carla's status as a grieving mother. On day 5, the landlord arrived with a choice: sign a personal guarantee for the remaining 34 months of the lease or vacate within 60 days. Seeing only the $620,000 in annual revenue she'd memorized, Carla signed her name. In that one stroke of a pen, she tethered her personal fortune to $142,000 in future rent. The true collapse began on day 8. Without Gail Horvath's institutional memory, the firm's QuickBooks was a labyrinth of categorized chaos. Carla hired a temp accountant who, after 4 hours of clicking through files, looked at Carla with the expression of someone who had just stepped off a cliff. She revealed another $115,000 in outstanding vendor invoices, some gathering dust for over a year. Then came Gail's own parting gift, a $20,000 claim for wrongful termination. When Carla called Axel Mendler in a tea-kettle pitch panic, he simply read his own advisory letter back to her. He had the waiver, he had the documentation. He had warned her, and she had ignored him. Desperate, she hired Betsy Polk, a shark from Cincinnati with no ties to the family. Betsy looked at the mountain of paperwork, the disclosures, the signed waivers, the transparent list of liabilities, and told Carla the brutal truth. Nothing had been hidden. I hadn't lied, I simply hadn't volunteered the existence of assets that were legally mine. What you have is not a legal claim, Betsy told her. What you have is a very expensive lesson. The aftermath was a slow-motion wreck. To cover the debts, Carla tried to sell the house, only to find that after the mortgage, the HELOC, and the fees, she would actually owe $11,000 at the closing table. The house wasn't a prize, it was an exit fee. To stay afloat, she began liquidated the dry cleaning business she had spent 30 years building. 2 stores vanished in 2 months, and it still wasn't enough. Spencer, seeing the ship sinking, tried to flee, only to realize his signatures at the bank had made him personally liable. He ended up hiring a lawyer to sue his own mother, claiming coercion. The inseparable team was now tearing each other apart in Kenton County Court. The last time Carla called me, she wasn't screaming. She was sobbing real, messy tears. She told me she was losing everything and begged for help. I listened to the silence between her gasps before I spoke. "Carla," I said, "you stood in my kitchen and told me you wanted everything except my daughter. I gave you exactly what you asked for." I hung up and went back to helping Tessa glue macaroni onto construction paper. That night, I sat at my IKEA table and opened my laptop. I enrolled in a paralegal certification program, the $4,000 tuition a mere shadow of the $1 million resting safely in my account. On my nightstand, framed in simple black wood, sat Joel's letter. I read the last line every night before the room went dark. "Don't let her take what matters. She can have the rest. Just trust." I finally understood what trust felt like. It felt like peace.